Marketing That Works is the podcast for business owners who want to move their brand forward so that they can bring in more sales and clients. I'm Danielle Harris, and I'm bringing you what I know from more than 12 years of experience in traditional and online marketing. I have created marketing strategies for businesses of all sizes, from multi-million-dollar corporations to early-stage online businesses. Remember, some marketers chase fads. I believe in mastering the fundamentals. Today is a special episode. I recently had the honor of being invited to speak on Shirin Eskandani's podcast, Wholehearted Coaching. I have known and worked with Shirin for a while now, and I even went through her life coaching certification program, which is centered on a decolonized approach to healing. And on this episode that I guest hosted, I talked about the feelings of shame and the role that it plays in our lives, and how shame, if you let it, can actually teach you something. It was such an amazing talk that I wanted to make sure that I brought it onto this podcast so that all of you all had a chance to listen. As you're going through this episode, I want you to be open to listening to an emotion you likely want to shut out and avoid. It can be uncomfortable, but the clarity that you get at the end after you listen to those emotions, it's unmatched, and you'll get something that you weren't even expecting. So take a listen, take some notes, let me know what you think. Enjoy the episode. Shame is a distorted form of support. Shame believes in me so much that it wants to protect me from failure. I know, it sounds weird, because most of what we hear from the personal development books and people online is about what shame keeps you from doing. Shame is keeping you from applying for the job because you didn't go to the right school. Shame is keeping you from talking to that cute person at the coffee shop because you think your body needs to look a certain way. Shame does do all those things, but it's been my experience that shame also believes in you. It just has a funny way of showing it. When we have any emotion that we don't love, we want to avoid it as much as possible. It just doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good being afraid to apply for the management role. It doesn't feel good believing that you don't have the right body, that you don't make enough money in your business, or whatever it is your brain is telling you. It makes you feel small. So how can the shame that makes you feel all of that actually believe in you? Well, let me tell you. Today, I want to spend some time talking about how I reframed my relationship with shame and perfectionism from adversaries to misunderstood allies, especially as an entrepreneur. I'll talk about some of the steps I took for myself and how you can embrace self-trust, release limiting beliefs, and take bolder steps in your personal and professional lives. But before we go any further, who am I to be talking to you about shame? Well, my name is Danielle R. Harris. I live outside of Detroit, where I was born and raised, and I grew up in a stereotypical suburban Detroit Black middle-class auto worker family. Dad worked for one of the big three auto companies. Mom stayed at home to take care of 3 kids. And as a child growing up, the one thing I didn't want to do was disappoint my parents. They worked hard to provide opportunities like taking dance classes or going to karate or taking us to shows in the theater, and the expectation that in return, I do well, that I live up to my potential, because I have potential. And so it was my job to do well to get scholarships, do well to achieve. And this desire to live up to these expectations left me feeling a type of way. One that a 16-year-old couldn't really put into words, but one that's felt nonetheless. And I wanted to meet those expectations. I wanted to be the best and get the good grades. But at the same time, I found myself not doing anything about it. I mean, I wanted to do things the right way, be the good student that got things done the right way. And when I struggled to do that, I'd find myself not studying, not writing the paper in advance, not doing the prep work. But that wasn't acceptable, because as much as I wanted to do everything the right way, I also didn't want to disappoint anyone. So what could possibly motivate me to actually get going and doing the work? Shame. Shame with a dash of guilt motivated me to study for the exam because I didn't want to be embarrassed with a bad grade. Shame motivated me to get the paper done because I didn't want to ever turn in something late and also have that triggering red ink all over the page. Never mind that the paper was done the night before, needed to be 25 pages long, and needed to be properly sourced, and of course, in the days before AI. Shame pushed me to get all of that done. And it worked. It worked very well. It got me into honors classes and AP classes. Just a simple recipe of 1 part fear of not doing well enough on tests and papers, and 2 part shaming into doing the work anyway. It got me through high school with scholarships. The shame system got me through college, got me through 2 master's degrees. It got me through my 10-year-long corporate career in marketing. Shame worked. It was a good system. I mean, clearly it wasn't, because I had to go kicking and screaming the entire process. Papers in school just got exchanged for reports and presentations in my career, but it was a system that helped me hit all of my major milestones in education and in my professional career. It was a system that had proven results. And I'm sure you have your own shame systems, waiting until the last minute to do something, claiming that all that pressure helps you work better. And if you're a high achiever, that last minute work you do is honestly very good. So you never actually learn the lesson of, and that's why you don't do it at the last minute. You don't get that lesson because you are good. So you simply repeat that over and over. The shame gets you to finally get the work done in the 11th hour, thinking one day I'll actually do this thing in advance and avoid all the stress and pressure. But you don't, because it always works out. But for me, that system only worked for so long, because when I decided to start my own marketing coaching business, the system broke. When I decided to work full time in my marketing business, helping coaches grow their business, I had this picture in my head of not needing to answer to anyone but myself. I could wake up when I wanted, set my own schedule, work with the kind of coaches who had true passion for helping people. I mean, the kind of people I've always wanted to work with. I was excited for this dream. But what I wasn't expecting was that the shame protocol that I had worked under for so long would be tested to the highest degree. You see, whenever I kept trying to get admin systems to work just right, or when I wanted to do or redo a caption, I'd always put that stuff off, just like I always had. And like I always had before, I'd wait for the shame to come, kick me into gear, and get me to work. But the shame was never strong enough. At least not anymore. Shame stopped being a powerful enough motivator to get me to work. I didn't have a parent that would be disappointed about an email going out. I didn't have a boss who would call me into their office because a post didn't go. It was just me. Me and my guilt and shame. And for a long time, I just sat around thinking that, oh, I'm lazy. That's what my shame and my inner critics do. Like, they work together to give you these narratives. These narratives playing in my head meant that I couldn't do the things I wanted in my business. And not in that hustle girl boss to the top way, but in that way where you have a vision of you want more, to do more, to be more. And to the outside world, it looked like I was killing it because I was showing up on Instagram and sending emails, but I knew that I had plans to do more. And the biggest thing was that I was tired of not living up to the potential that I knew I had. Not because of what a parent expects or a professor or a boss. I was at the point where I didn't want to disappoint myself. And it wasn't until I was fully only accountable to myself in my business that it became clear I needed to address this problem. And the gap between how I felt, lazy and unable to get things that I wanted done, and the vision of the business I wanted, it felt so large. And the one tool, shame, that I had been able to use from high school to college to my career was no longer able to motivate me to work. And it wasn't until I learned something that things began to change for me. I learned that all of our emotions are trying to tell us something. Something I actually learned from Shirin. And it honestly started with me being guided to explore the reasons why I'd not studied in school, why I did the report my boss gave me 2 days before it was due, why I couldn't ever seem to become as organized in my business as I wanted. I thought I had big dreams and I was too lazy to get to work and make it happen. But I learned that I'm actually just a procrastinator perfectionist. If I can't see how I can easily complete a task perfectly, I just won't do it, which makes so much sense. I wanted so much to please so many people, to do a good job. And if I couldn't see it right away how I could do it just right, I simply didn't do anything. But shame. Shame got me to go to work. This shame that I always wanted to avoid, that I never wanted to feel, had a role. And because of what I learned from Shirin, I decided to talk to my shame. I simply sat down and asked shame what it was trying to tell me. Honestly, I felt a little silly doing it because I was sure that it was going to tell me that I wasn't good enough, that I should push a bit harder because at my core, I wasn't good enough to really reach and accomplish what I wanted. But instead, I got an interesting answer. Shame told me that it had always believed in me, that I could accomplish whatever I wanted. Shame's only job was to get me to work on the things that it knew that I could accomplish. And shaming worked. So it kept up with it. Somewhere along the way, the shame became so much more than just a tool to get me to get things done. It got mixed in with perfectionism and doubt and fear, as it tends to do. So whenever shame came up to motivate me to work, I felt like it was just telling me I wasn't capable. I realized that shame only ever wanted to help me reach my potential. I realized that perfectionism came along because it wanted me to do a good job. And I realized that shame only ever wanted me to do a good job because it knew that I could. These realizations, they were so huge in helping me redefine how I saw myself and what I was capable of. These revelations especially helped me to understand what the critical voices in my head actually wanted to tell me. So many of us hear the critical voices in our head and take them at face value. You might hear those voices say, I'm not good enough, I'm not deserving, it couldn't be me. You want to fight that voice because you don't want to believe it. Yet that voice, that critical voice, which is so closely related to shame, is still impacting your decision making and confidence. You still don't go after the things that you want for fear of proving that that critical voice was right. You don't go after the business that you want, the job you want, the relationship you want, because it would prove that the critical voice was right if it doesn't happen. Because if you don't go after the things, you can't prove that mean voice was right. And what I realized after taking time to actually sit down with my feelings of shame is that these voices might actually be saying something completely different. Now, before I get into talking about how I was able to get to the point of having this conversation with my shame, I want to tell you something. I assumed that I was already very self aware and knew what was happening in my head. And I'm sure you're very similar. You're someone who's committed to doing the work, who has a vision for yourself, and you know all the things that get into your way. But I want to challenge you today. I want you to spend some time, either today or before the end of the week, sitting down and having a talk with these inner critics. And when I say have a talk with these critics, these voices, here's what I mean. Go voice out loud or write in a journal all the critical thoughts that run through your mind. It is so important that you don't simply do this in your head. I know that you're going to be tempted to do that, but in your head, where it is right now, that's where those thoughts already live. The goal is to air out these thoughts. This breakthrough that I had when I realized that shame believes in me, it happened when I recorded a voice note while driving. Now, write or speak out loud all the critical thoughts that come to mind when it comes to a goal that you have. For me, I was frustrated that I wasn't making progress on planning in advance for my business. So I listed all the things that came to mind. The next thing that I want you to do is I want you to ask yourself, what feeling is at the core of this? For me, it was shame. For you, it could be embarrassment or fear or sadness. And then I want you to ask that emotion what it wants you to know. Sit with that for a moment. Don't rush it. And voice note or write out what the response is. And for this question, I want you to ask it a few times. It has probably been so long since you have given your inner critic and these emotions the space to share what's really going on. What tends to happen is that for fear of not having enough time to fully air out their piece, your inner critics put out a soundbite. And it might sound like a quick, do better, that's what happens, that's not enough. And that's just a desperate statement. Your inner critic and shame, it feels like it only ever gets a moment to talk. So in the half second that it gets to speak, it makes this desperate yell. And as you know, it almost never sounds great. But when you're patient and when your inner critic knows you're actually there to listen to more than just a soundbite, you'll be surprised with what comes up. Here's the most important part. You have to actually do something with that information. Let's say that you want to start a life coaching business for yourself. When you do this exercise, you could focus on the shame that comes up around making marketing content for your business. You see other people who seem to know what to say, like the coaches that you admire and other people that you're coming up with. And your inner critic, it starts offering you thoughts that are full of shame because you don't show up like they do. You find yourself unable to market your business and help the people you feel so called to help because of that inner critic. So, you do this exercise and you talk to your shame and you realize that you are confident in your voice and that you know what kind of marketing you want to make. But the way you want to show up, it looks different from the people that you admire. Your shame isn't telling you that you aren't good enough. It isn't telling you that you aren't good at marketing or running a business. It is actually telling you that what you want to do is different than anyone else. And you're nervous about it. Your shame in this moment is trying to protect you from doing something different than other people that you look up to and admire. Because what if it's wrong? Your shame believes in you so much that it wants to make sure that it keeps you safe at any cost. So, now, you might have a little bit more faith in your voice and how you want to show up in the world. Because now you know that you do believe in yourself, and shame and your inner critics, they were only trying to protect you. After you do this exercise, you can now carry on and hold that realization that you can start to experiment with and start showing up differently while befriending that inner critic voice of yours. But in the days after you do this exercise, I need you to remember the conversations that you had. Because let's say that you had this talk with your feelings and your inner critic on Monday, and you're feeling empowered. You have that breakthrough glow. But when you go to create some marketing for your business on Friday, you need to remember that conversation you had back on Monday, because it is so easy to fall back into that habit of believing that you aren't good enough and that you don't know what you're doing and what you're doing isn't right. Which is why I believe so firmly that you need to write down or voice record these insights, because you will forget. You'll forget that you know your own voice. You'll forget that you do believe in yourself, and you'll quickly move into old habits that aren't serving you. I mean, for so long, I believed that my shame was telling me that I wasn't able to do so many things, but guilted and dragged me along the way to try to do it. But when I realized that in its own weird way, shame actually believed in me, I needed to hold on to that belief, not the shame part. The shame had done its job of protecting me. At this point, I needed to take back the control through learning how to hold on to my belief. And that's because the shame wasn't working anymore to motivate me. I had to actively work to remember that I do believe in myself and find more productive ways to motivate myself, even though that literally worked for 20 years. When I did this work, I discovered that my shame was showing me, in a unique way, that it believed in me, and my eyes were opened. And I'm sure that when you do this exercise, the same will happen for you. But the work ahead is how you will let go of the patterns that you held on to for years and then create new ones. I mean, for me, for 20 years, shame worked to get me every accomplishment that I have. It would be so easy to say that I wouldn't have worked as hard without it, because if I could work as hard, I would have done that already. But the truth is, I wasn't self-aware enough to realize this. For the goals and the things that I want to accomplish in my life and in my business, I need to go deeper for a source of motivation. I don't know if you remember the movie Monsters, Inc., but fear powered the city the monsters lived in. The power plant was a fear factory, and the monsters would come into work every day to scare little kids at night to power their city. It was a system. It worked, it got results. But at some point, it stopped working. The fear wasn't powerful enough to fuel the city. But you know what was? Laughter, joy. It was way more powerful than fear. And with laughter, the monster city was able to create a supply of energy for years. Your motivation, fueled by your fear and shame, can only work for so long. At some point, it won't take you to your dreams and desires. And I see it so often with coaches running their business. What worked in school and in their career isn't working as a business owner. It isn't working to help you meet new people. It isn't working to help you market your business the way you want. And that's because you'll need to tap into your beliefs to motivate you. Tapping into your belief and faith will be so much more powerful. You'll be able to accomplish so much more than you ever imagined. The relationship between shame, your inner critic, and entrepreneurship is something that I am always working with my clients on. It is an ever evolving conversation, and I notice this especially present when business owners market themselves. I hope that through this episode and me sharing my own journey with shame and my inner critic, you explore your relationship with them. Go through the exercise of talking to your critic, give it space, and allow it to show you how it is protecting you. If you need support in doing this, specifically around marketing, know that I am here to help. I'd love to hear about what surprising things your own inner critics have said to you. So feel free to connect with me on Instagram at danielle.r.harris. And if you're interested in learning about the work that I do with coaches who are looking to market and grow their coaching businesses, you can listen to my podcast, Marketing That Works. Okay, everyone. I hope to connect with you all soon. If you want more marketing that works right in your inbox, head to the show notes and sign up for the email list. You'll be the first to know how you can work with me on mastering your marketing.